Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, a nation scarred by war and caught up in the biggest geopolitical battle between Russia and the West in decades. Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan, and this is Al Jazeera's continuing week-long coverage of the Ukraine war 1 year on. The staggering human toll of a war that's now being fought in the cold, hard trenches of Ukraine's eastern and southern front lines. Every so often, the air raid sirens here are a chilling reminder of the horrors of the conflict. Thousands of civilians have been killed since Russian forces invaded Ukraine 1 year ago. Millions of people, mostly women and children, have been separated from their families and are forced to live as refugees abroad. The signs of war are everywhere, and they affect everyone. Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdelhamid has covered the conflict extensively over the past year. Hoda, you're at Kyiv's Wall of Remembrance. Tell us more about where you are.
Well, this is actually a very emotional place here in the heart of Kyiv, and throughout the day you see people coming and putting flowers and candles. It's called, as you said, the Wall of Remembrance because you have pictures of some of those who have lost their lives on the front lines since the Russian invasion. This war specifically shows those who have died since the 24th of February 2022. But down the line there you have actually the pictures of all those soldiers who, a number of them who have died since the conflict started back in 2014. And up to the 24th of February, up to the invasion, well, that number was about 14,000. Now, we don't know how many soldiers have died since the invasion started, but we did hear from President Zelensky several times throughout the year that Ukraine is paying a high price. At some point during the summer, he did say that about 50 soldiers were dying per day, but we don't have a full figure of that. We also don't have a full figure how many civilians have died. The UN says that it has accounted of about 8,000, but it also says that that's only the tip of the iceberg, because there are places that have seen fierce battles, like Mariupol, for example. Nobody really knows the total number of people who lost their lives there. It was a very high number. It was a very fierce battle. Well, we don't have the full picture of that, and we don't have the full picture of many other places that are currently in battle. So yes, Ukraine is paying a very high price, not only since 24th of February 2022, but all the way back to 2014.
And of course, Hoda, this conflict is dividing families, both within Ukraine and across borders.
Absolutely. It's really a conflict that is tearing family apart. You mentioned earlier about all these families, mothers and children who had to leave the country for really to save their families, leaving behind their husbands, their sons, their brothers. And I remember at the beginning of this conflict, you would see these heart-wrenching scenes at train stations, at border crossings, tears flowing down their faces, knowing that this is the beginning of a new chapter in their family lives, but not knowing when they will be reunited again. Very, very difficult moments to witness. And then you have also other kind of separations that started actually back in 2014. You had these ideological separations, those who want to live under a Ukrainian government in Ukraine, want to be part of Ukraine, and those who prefer to stay at the beginning of this conflict with the separatists and now are actually also staying in those Russia-occupied areas like Zaporizhia. I remember just before the annexation by Russia, which is considered illegitimate, you saw these people coming out not knowing when they were going to see their families again, or not knowing when they will ever be able to go back home. So certainly a conflict, a war that has touched every single family in a way or another.
Hoda, many thanks indeed. Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdelhamid there live at the Wall of Remembrance here in Kiev. Well, a generation of Ukraine's children are suddenly having to deal with the reality of war, something that no child should have to experience. Some have been killed. Many have lost a parent or are separated from their loved ones. And the UN is warning of a looming mental health crisis with 1.5 million children at risk. Zain Basravi reports now from Irpin, which endured weeks of Russian occupation.
Aid workers operating on the front lines in Ukraine say the country's young are in trouble, sounding an alarm difficult to hear over air raid sirens.
Every day things are going in the wrong direction for children. I mean, children are away from their parents, children are away from their friends, children are away from normalcy.
Unless there is peace, and soon the mental health of the youngest victims of this war will only get worse.
The lives of more than 7 million children upside down since the beginning of the war. I give an example. I mean, last year this time you wouldn't have children who would say, hey, this is the sound of this missile, this is the sound of this tank, or this is a machine gun noise kind of thing. But now thousands of children and millions of children are losing their childhood because they are exposed to the war.
As NATO leaders talk about sending more weapons to Ukraine, children seeing the war up close often stop speaking and become unable to socialize or connect with others. The most vulnerable are those closest to the front lines. Where there's relative peace, there are reasons for hope. In Irpin, the sounds of joy replace the sounds of shells. A year after Russia's occupation, families are finding ways of getting back to normal.
At that time, I couldn't understand how it could be in the 21st century that a war could start. I was trying to keep my daughter calm. For children, the most important thing is to feel safe and communicate with their classmates. When we returned to Irpin over time, they allowed children to attend school, and we're very happy.
Teachers are using remote learning for students living as refugees outside of Ukraine, extra classes, and whatever else they can offer, to turn what became a flashpoint back into a place of learning. Teachers say they think their school was deliberately targeted. Even after the repairs, you can see where the shrapnel and bullets hit the side of this building. Now, it is much easier to repair obvious damage like this. The teachers and parents we've been speaking to say it is much more difficult to repair the kind of damage you cannot see. Educators say they are trying to make sure a generation is not lost to the war. Are you glad to be back in school? Are you happy school started again? How did you feel when you came back?
I love going to school. This is very happy. I'm speaking with children, with teachers. This is very happy going to school.
It could take years to rehabilitate those in Ukraine's school system. But for teachers here, every child back in a classroom is a child saved. Zain Basravi, Al Jazeera, Irpin.
Well, joining me now from Copenhagen is WHO Europe Regional Director Hans Klug. Good to have you with us, sir. How can the WHO head off this child mental health crisis? Can it?
Well, Adrian, as you know, recently I came back from my 5th mission to Ukraine since last year. And I always want to start with a more optimistic note. I'm always impressed by the resilience of the health system, the healthcare workers, the children themselves. I went this time to a rehabilitation center where children really injured were trying to get back on track with their life. But it's just a fact that every single person in the society is affected mental health-wise. We know from our latest health survey that 1 out of 10 Ukrainian people affected by the war has a moderate or severe mental health condition, and 1 out of 5 of people affected by the war some kind of mental health condition, going from depression, anxiety, up to psychosis.
So what will the country need from the WHO to help it cope with this mental health crisis?
Right, actually we do have tools. First and foremost, I would say the key issue is to destigmatize, and that's why once again I was very inspired meeting the First Lady, Madame Olena Zelenska, who herself is championing the mental health program, to speak about it, to give the people a sense of purpose, to give children an environment where they feel safe, even if they're separated from their parents, that there is someone they feel comfortable to talk to. That's one. Second is, as the First Lady is telling, every single person in the Ukrainian society to become a psychologist. So we're doing a lot of self-help training courses that everyone can help themselves mentally, can give psychosocial first aid to their neighbors, the people in society. And then very important, actually, that a lot of Western countries can learn from, is to take mental health care out of the institutions to the communities with mobile community mental health teams, educating primary healthcare physicians. And I was very impressed to see, when I discussed with the Minister of Health, Dr. Victor Lashko, last week, that now there are special financing schemes in primary healthcare to provide that mental health support.
I want to ask you, away from mental health, how are Ukraine's health services in general coping right now?
Well, Adrian, I'm always amazed that the health system is standing. Again, a little bit to the optimistic note that we had so many doom scenarios, an explosion of infectious disease, COVID-19, TB, HIV. The health system would collapse. The health system is standing, but this is thanks, I would say, two major things. A heroic health workforce, I cannot underscore this enough, and second, international support for salaries and medicines, and that has to continue. We cannot let fatigue win 1 year since the war started, because what I took away last week is that sadly the impact of the war on health of the population in Ukraine is not going to decrease, I think only to increase for the time to come. So we have to stand in solidarity.
Really good to talk to you, Hans. Many thanks indeed for being with us. Hans Klug, their Regional Director of WHO Europe. Well, the war has separated so many families. More than 8 million Ukrainian refugees have fled to neighbouring countries, most of them women and children. Poland has welcomed the most, with around 1.5 million people settling there. Germany is hosting an estimated 1 million Ukrainian refugees, but like many countries, it's faced challenges, especially in providing proper housing and services. The Czech Republic took in around 500,000 people. It's one of 27 EU nations where Ukrainians are allowed to live and work for up to 3 years. Italy, Spain, and the UK are also supporting Ukrainian refugees. Each has welcomed around 150,000 people. Jonah Hull reports now from a reception centre in Poland, where he met a Ukrainian teacher whose life changed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and now, due to the war, it's taken another uncertain turn.
So a year since the war began, and astonishingly, reception centres for Ukrainian refugees like this one are still extremely busy. Some Ukrainians are going home, of course, but every day more and more are arriving here in Poland. I've been fortunate enough to meet one of these people, a young person called Anastasia, who is here in the reception centre in Przemyśl. Thanks so much for talking to us, Anastasia. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about why you made the decision, a year since the beginning of the war, to leave your country.
We made the decision because there was an electricity cut in our town. It was like 15 hours per day, every day. I worked online. I had problems on my job because I'm a teacher actually, and it was hard to make normal lessons, to teach children. But now we thought, like, it's been a year. It will not end soon.
Yeah.
And we don't know when it's a war exactly.
You were telling me earlier you thought initially the war might end sooner, but now you realize it's not going to. You're here with your mother and your little brother.
We are hoping to go to Hanover at first, and then
Hanover in Germany.
yes, in Germany, and then we will try to find a job in Germany and live here till the war ends.
Anastasia, you're 22 years old, you're a teacher. How does it feel at this stage in your life to confront this uncertainty about what will happen next?
You know, I'm in this condition like from 2019 because of COVID, so I used to such kind of challenges life gives to me and my family. It's sad, but it's the way it is.
So that was Anastasia, who later tonight will be boarding a train for Hanover in Germany with her mother and her little brother. And even though she has a plan, many people here simply do not. It is a plan with a very uncertain conclusion as the refugee count goes up every day now, and none of them can possibly have any idea when and if they'll be able to return to Ukraine. Jonah Hull, Al Jazeera, in Przemyśl on the Polish border with Ukraine.
In the US, more than 22,000 Ukrainian refugees have entered through the Mexican border. It's come at a great price, as Al Jazeera's Heidi Jo Castro reports.
A year ago, Levgenia Maltseva could not have been further from this moment. She was in Kharkiv in a windowless basement as bombs exploded and the ground shook.
I talked with my husband, please go away from here. I don't want to die.
They decided to drive west, joining multitudes of civilians fleeing the fighting. For 5 days, they drove along congested roads until they neared the Polish border. There, a difficult choice awaited. Maltseva could cross into Poland alone or remain in Ukraine with her fiancé. He would stay to defend his country.
Crying me, crying my husband, crying his mom. No, it's sad because I need to go.
But first they would get married, a simple ceremony to tie themselves together in the face of chaos. And then they parted. Maltseva stayed briefly at a refugee camp in Poland, then boarded a flight to Mexico, where her twin sister and brother-in-law, both U.S. citizens, joined her. The three traveled along the Mexico-U.S. border, searching for a way to get Maltseva into the U.S.
Officer said, no, for Ukrainians, close. You have to move it next border. So we moved it to next border. Next border said, no.
Finally, U.S. border agents in San Diego allowed Maltseva to enter, and she arrived in the U.S. 52 days after leaving home.
Привіт, Zai.
Now Maltseva lives with her sister's family in Maryland. She speaks with her husband in Ukraine several times a day. He's now a volunteer tactical medic.
I'm very proud of him, but sometimes he needs to stop and think. He can't because he wants to help all people, to save all people.
Happy moments at the kitchen table are followed by sleepless nights of flashbacks and nightmares, says Maltseva. She wants to return home.
We want to help Ukraine to grow up again.
Meanwhile, singing songs from her homeland with her sister brings Maltseva joy. They raise their voices loudly, louder than the echoes of war. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Silver Spring, Maryland.
Well, tens of thousands of Russians have also fled their country since the start of the war. President Vladimir Putin's decree of partial military mobilization meant that many could have been forced to enlist to fight in Ukraine. Georgia is one of the places that some young Russians have gone to, but as Fintan Monahan reports now, this new community of exiles hasn't received a warm welcome.
Gleb Kuznetsov is a long way from home. He had a life back in his hometown of St. Petersburg, but when war broke out, he knew what he had to do.
We were on our way here. We didn't know whether we would stay here or move elsewhere. Our objective was just to get out of Russia, then to look around and then make a decision.
Gleb is one of thousands of Russians who fled to Georgia to avoid fighting on the front lines. He started a business and is carving out a new life. But he's found that newcomers aren't being welcomed with open arms.
We've had virtually no Georgian customers. There were a few people who work nearby who would drop by for a coffee, but you could count them on one hand.
Anti-Russian graffiti is everywhere. The two countries have a fraught history. They went to war over breakaway regions in 2008. Many Georgians became refugees in their own country, and bitterness remains. The new arrivals have also pushed up housing prices, further stoking resentment.
They're not our friends, they're our enemies. It's a fact. And them doing business here and drinking with us is just plain wrong. Terrible, I would say.
I wouldn't go into a Russian-owned cafe. I want to support Georgian businesses.
But some are seeking to build bridges. Here at this bar, Russians are studying the Georgian language. Those reaching out to this new community believe acceptance may come with time.
The Russians who fled the war have only just arrived. We have not got acquainted yet. We don't know each other well. We are not used to each other.
Both communities may have no choice but to learn how to coexist. There's no telling how long the war in Ukraine will last, so for now at least, Georgia's Russian exiles may be here to stay. Fintan Monahan, Al Jazeera.
Well, the war has affected several Russian artists and their careers abroad. Some have lost their jobs in parts of Europe and North America. Dominic Kane reports now from Berlin.
Tuesday morning in Berlin, and it's rehearsal time for Ekaterina Syurina. As a professional opera singer, her voice is her living. She's performed at the Royal Opera House in London, La Scala in Milan, and the Met in New York. But once Russia invaded Ukraine, all that changed.
I lost my job in Poland right away because it was in March. And my good friend, who's now director of the opera there, was calling and saying, I'm very, very sorry, I apologize, but the problem is that right now government kind of forcing us to quit on Russian singers.
In Germany too, Ekaterina says people reacted.
They still judge me as my Russian last name and just being cancelled. And I understand sometimes people just want for other people to pay, you know, or being punished somehow. And I do understand everything, but it's really sometimes feel unfair.
I don't see a trend.
It's not just in the musical world that connections with Russia are proving problematic.
With a kind of unprecedented decision, we decided not to invite or to let companies that are supported by Iranian government or Russian government to be part of the FM.
Several of the films in this year's Berlinale make specific reference to the war in Ukraine, but one documentary provides us with a view of President Zelensky as the invasion drew near. In the film Superpower, the actor Sean Penn meets the president in Kiev and experiences the reality of war at first hand. When the Ukrainian president addressed this year's festival, he urged those in the world of arts and culture to take a stand.
Culture makes choices in times like this. Culture chooses the side or speaks out in different ways, fighting and standing against the evil, or overlooks and remains silent.
But what if that choice means Russians who had no part in the war are effectively silenced? Ekaterina believes arts and music should help to bring people together. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Berlin.
War, of course, is no laughing matter, but as Mark Twain said, against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. One comedian here in Ukraine is using the power of laughter to raise money for the war effort and help to distract people from the anxieties and uncertainties of life in a country at war. I sat down with Anton Timoshenko, who's been performing throughout the conflict.
The first shows in shelter we made on April, it was maybe the best shows in my life because the reaction is super powerful because people had so many tension, so many stress, so people need to relieve the stress, and jokes help him to relieve the stress. From these 40 people I get, I think, more powerful reaction than from like 1,000 people sometimes, because you just feel how the stress go out from the body.
And why is it so important of you to do gigs like this where you're raising money for the military effort?
I feel guilty every day, and my colleagues too, all the guys who is not on the front line like me, we feel guilty every day, so we need to be at least useful now and help them to raise some money. Me and my colleagues, nobody wants to buy a flat or a car or something, we want to buy a weapon or some kind of drones, and you don't see a reason to have something expensive in your life now. You just need to buy something for your guys and help them as much as you can. I must say my friends who are on the front line, they help me like a psychotherapist. They say, don't worry, Anton, you're useful, that's fine, don't blame yourself too much. Because I have my colleague Sergei Lipko, he's a comedian also, like me, and he went to the front line from the first days. He also could choose this way, like me, just to perform, raise money, but he decided that he will be useful more at the front line. And he on the Bakhmut right now. This is a hell on earth. So it motivates you to do something useful every day.
Of course, President Zelensky was a comedian. What sort of comedian was he? Was he any good?
Yeah, he was great. Like he made this mass market comedy, when all the family can watch his, videos or his shows. So I like it till like 15, 16 years old. Then I grew up, and then I want to find something more rough, something more brave, something more fresh and modern comedy. So I started to watch stand-up or some, comedy shows in Ukraine. And he was not so funny for me for last I don't know how many 9 years, 10. But last year and this year he is super funny again, because even in this crazy conditions, journalists like to ask me these questions. Oh, you're a comedian, so maybe you want to be the next president of Ukraine? No, I don't want to, because I don't think somebody wants to have this kind of job when you need to feel yourself every day and say, hello, I'm alive, I'm still alive, so what we have today? This stressful job. And even in this condition, he joking. I didn't vote for Zelensky, and now I realize he is the best option to be a president in this kind of war, because in this kind of war, you need support from the world, because we have a war with one of the biggest countries in the world, one of the biggest evil in the world. And if your president have this experience to perform, to work with the crowd, that's nice. He can get the reaction, he can add some jokes, he can work with emotions of people, and that's critically important in our moment, because it takes people attention at our problems for a year. That's a lot of job, I think. And my advice for the countries who have war, just try to vote for an interesting president, like comedian, blogger, or OnlyFans model, I don't know, someone who will involve the international audience in your problems.
And that's it from me, Adrian Finnegan in Kyiv. Make sure you tune in at these times, where we'll explore how the Ukraine war is fueling a new global arms race.